Now for the next one, we'll be discussing all about the internal rate of return. This is the continuation of all the three previously mentioned MARR methods that we've discussed. So let me just read you muna yung exact definition ng IRR method natin. So this is the most widely used rate of return. So, di ba meron tayong 5 of them. So this IRR is usually the best pick kung we want to evaluate a certain project or proposal. And this is sometimes called the investors method, the discounted cash flow method, and the profitability. Now, it has several names. It could be the investors method, the discounted cash flow method, or the profitability index. So, ang kaibahan nito sa previous natin is that we're letting X yung ating interest rate, and then we're trying to equate yung ating let's say investment cost in terms of future present worth, and then we're trying to determine yung X natin and compare if this IRR is less than or greater than the MARR. So in short, the assumption that we do here is that if the present worth is 0, or the annual worth is 0, or the future worth is 0, then that means we can compute for the value of I, and then that I, upon comparison with MARR, then we can just tell if this project is economically justifiable or not. Now, unlike dun sa three previously mentioned rules, na we have to remember wherein if PW or AW or FW is greater than 0, we could say that the project or the proposal is economically justified. But in this case, we're dealing with IRR, which is actually a percentage. So it doesn't mean that if we have a percentage answer, or an answer that is greater than 0, it doesn't mean that it is actually, the proposal is already economically justified. We have to compare this IRR to the MARR, and we have to make sure that if this IRR is equal or greater than the MARR, then we can say that the project is economically justified. So the most important rule here is that we remember this. Okay, so in every problem, you will see that there's an MARR given, but you won't be using that MARR because what you have to do here is to compute for the internal rate of return, that is simply the I%, and then compare with the given MARR. Okay, so let's try solving for now. The another approach for this IRR is through an investment balance diagram. This is the investment balance diagram, but I won't be dealing much on this because this is a more complicated scenario. At saka mas mahaba yung computation natin using this, but the idea is still the same for the previously mentioned rule na ito lang. So we'll just stick with this. Okay. Ayan pa. Another dito is that it involves trial and error calculations. So, it's a lot parang more difficult to understand knowing na meron man tayong shift solve function. Okay, so let's start with the first one. We have the AMT Incorporated is considering the purchase of a digital camera for the maintenance of design specifications by feeding digital pictures directly into an engineering workstation where computer-aided design files can be superimposed over the digital pictures. Differences between the two images can be noted and corrections as appropriate can then be made by design engineers. The capital investment requirement is $345,000. So technically this is the investment, and the estimated market value, that is the salvage value at the end of the 6 years. So the system after a 6-year period is $115,000. Annual revenues attributable to the new camera system will be $120,000, so that is revenue, no? Whereas additional expenses will be $22,000. You have been asked by the management to determine the IRR of this project and make a recommendation. The corporation's MAR is 20% per year. So yeah, we have to compute for this. Now there are a lot of ways we can solve for this. We can use the PW method, the FW, and then the AW. Now I'll be using AW for this now, and then you can freely do another method. You can select FW or PW just to check this now, but I'll be using AW. For me, mas madali siya in this case. So, setting our annual worth equal to 0, and this is actually equal to the revenue minus the expenses minus the capital recovery, we could therefore say that the expenses or the capital recovery is simply equal to the revenue minus the expenses natin, or the annual expenses. So from this idea, we know quite well na yung ating revenue would be the 100, ay, sorry, so ba yun? 120,000. So with this, we have 120,000. And then minus natin yung annual expenses. So we have 22,000. Okay? And then this should be equal to the capital recovery. That is, starting from the investment that we have, divided, we have 345,000. So this I would be 345,000. We'll have to amortize this in terms of 6 years kasi 6 years ang ating study period. So 345,000, and remember sa cash flow natin, this is the investment, so we have to use the present worth uniform series factor. So that is 1 minus 1 plus. Now yung I natin, ito yung unknown, so that is I, and then we raise this to negative 6, and then divided by I, and then we raise this to negative 1. Okay, so that we are able to amortize this in 6 annual payments. And now for the salvage value, we subtract this. So minus, we have, nasan ba yun? 115,000. This is multiplied with 1 plus I raised to 6 minus 1 over I, and then we raise this to negative 1. Okay? And then solving for I, we will be able to obtain. So ang gawin nyo lang dyan is just use yung shift solve function nyo sa calculator, and then you should be able to obtain the answer. And usually naman pag nagkamali kayo ng answer, baka nagkabaliktad lang yung inyong dyan pagta-type, no? Or hindi nyo nalagyan ng negative 1 dun sa taas ng inyong mga uniform series factor, kasi usually ganun yung nagiging problem din eh. But just remember na when it comes to this uniform series factor, kapag nasa present tayo, negative yung natin exponent. Pagka future, positive yun. Okay? So you should be able to obtain that answer, and yun nga. So I should give you a value of 0.2203. So parang ganun. And then in terms of percentage, this is actually equal to 22.0256%. Okay? So nakuha naman natin ng tama yung ating sa answer. Okay? And that is your I. But if this certain problem asks you if your system is economically justified, so you have to compare this I with your MARR. So since MARR is 20% and I is greater than MARR, so we could say that through IRR method, we could say that this project is economically justified because your interest rate is greater than the MARR of the company. So ganun lang siya kasimple, no? What if you do annual worth method? So ang gagawin mo lang dyan for annual worth, wala pa, annual worth na pala ginawa natin. For present worth is set mo lang siya sa 0 and then just equate the two values, and then you should be able to obtain yung inyong value ng I. So ganun lang, and you should be able to get the same results in this case. So it's always up to you kung ano yung best preference ninyo for the solution. Sa akin kasi annual worth in this case is the best method. Okay, now let's proceed to the next one. Pasensya na medyo maliit yung space natin kasi mahirap maglipat-lipat eh. I think kasya naman siguro siya dito, no? Now for number 2, sabi dito, piece of new equipment has been proposed by engineers to increase the productivity of a certain manual welding operation, and then the investment cost is 25,000 and the equipment will have a market salvage value of 5,000. Now let's try to label them. So this one is the investment cost, this one is the salvage value, and then the expected life is 5 years. So this is N is equal to 5. And then the increased productivity attributable to the equipment will amount to 8,000 per year. So itong nabasa nyo na ito, extra operating costs have been subtracted from the value of the additional production. So that is actually R minus E na yan. So that means this is the profit already. That's 8,000 annual. Parang ganun. Then if is the investment a good one, recall that the MAR is 20% per year. So like the one that I did before, I'll be using the annual worth method, knowing na R minus E ko is equal to 8,000 na. So we could just say that this is 8,000 and this should be equal to yung ating mga capital recovery. That's 25,000 multiplied by 1 minus 1 plus I raised to, sabi dito meron tayong 5, so negative 5 over I, and then we subtract yung ating 8,000 sorry, hindi pala 8,000. Yung ating salvage value na 5,000. 1 plus I raised to 5 minus 1 over I raised to negative 1. Okay, and this should give you a value of
a few moments later.
So it usually takes at least 7 to 8 seconds to determine yung ating answer. So that is 0.2157. That is 21.5776%. Okay, so this is the sorry, I forgot to write negative 1. Okay, so yun, that is 21.5776. So kung mapansin nyo, medyo matagal kasi mag-solve yan kasi syempre that's inside an exponential function. That's why it has to iterate a lot. Pero hintayin nyo lang, at least 7 seconds usually dapat makomo na yung sagot. But if it exists at that seconds, or at least 10 seconds, no? Pero kung more than 10 seconds, I think hindi nyo na makukuha yung sagot dyan. Just to make sure na, you stick with the rule, kailangan may negative 1 lagi dito, no? Kasi we're using the present or the future worth, and then we're amortizing this into annual payments, or depending on the number of payment periods. So, that's very important. Okay? Now, let's do number 3. Sabi dito, in 1915, Albert Einstein, sorry, nadala ako. In 1915, Albert Epstein I don't think this is Epstein, but siguro actually kasi yung iba dito parang kinopya ko lang naman yan, tapos inedit ko lang yung mga given minsan. So pero I think Albert Epstein nga to allegedly borrowed $7,000 from a large New York bank on the condition that he would pay 7% of the loan every 3 months until a total of 50 payments have been made. Now, we have to emphasize here na yung ating interest rate ay sige, ituloy muna natin. At the time of the 50th payment, the 7,000 loan would be completely repaid. Albert computed this annual interest rate to be, so the computation is given, and then that is 28%. So, what true effective annual interest rate did Albert pay? Now, in this case, I'll be using yung ating common knowledge to determine yung ating true effective annual rate of interest. Kasi this is this is not really yung parang computation natin na ginagawa using IRR na talagang meron mga salvage value. So, kasi ang ginawa lang dito is nag-show siya ng computation that is 28%, but then again dito mag-stick lang tayo dun sa condition na meron siyang 7,000 na hiniram, and then after 3 months may total na 50 payments na ang kanya magawa, tapos 7% of the loan yung babayaran niya. So yun, ganun yung gagawin natin, no? Now, considering yung ating 7% of the loan, we could say na yung kanyang annual payments would always be 0.07 tapos original, so that's 7,000. This gives us $490 na binabayad niya every month. Now, basically, kung i-check natin, 490 siya all throughout the 50 payments, and mind you, yung 490 na yan, you just need to actually have 14 payments para mabayaran talaga yung yung ni-loan, or 15 payments para mabayaran. But basically, since napakalaki ng interest na pinataw, so we have to make sure na 490 yung binabayad niya, 50 payments in total. So, walang tayong problema kung ilang months ba yun, basta we have to make sure that that's 50. So, with that being said, ano ba yung totoong annual interest na binabayad niya? So, we could say na for 7,000, this should be, we'll be using parang 7,000 times natin sa A, and then yung ating factor, which is P given A, and then yung I percent natin, and then N. Hindi ko sure kung kita nyo, pero tumutulo pawis ko. Sobrang init ngayon. Anyway, so 7,000, that is equal to the annual payment, sorry, not the annual, but the payment done every 3 months. So that's 490 quantity 1 minus 1 plus I, that's the true effective rate interest. And then we raise this to negative. So how many payments that we do? So 50, and then divided by I. Okay. Now, baka mag-isip kayo, sir, ba't di yan dinivide sa 4? Kasi nga, parang every 3 months. Now, basically, ang ibig sabihin lang nitong I na to, this is already yung ating R over M. So, yung M ko, that is correct. That should be 4. Pero yung R ko, hindi ko naman alam yan. Pero, it doesn't necessarily mean na kailangan ko pa silang computent kasi I lang naman ang hinaharap natin. So, might as well use I. And then, 50 na lang to. Itong 50, it came from actually the number of years divided by 3. So parang, the number of years times 3. So basically, ganun siya, no? And that is actually equal to 50. So 50 over 3, yun yung total number of years that you're actually paying. So with this, your I would be equal to,
A few moments later.
so that is 0.06730, and this is equal to 6.7304%. Okay, so that's also the one written in your handout. So ganun lang siya kasimple, and diba, this one is already computed before in your prelim. Parang ganito yung idea nun before in time. Mag-start tayo magkaroon ng effective or annual interest rate, diba? Sometimes we even do this by using muna yung ating IJO so that we can have an annual interest rate before we start computing for the PW, FW. So, di ba may mga ganun din. But then, what is the answer for the next one we're in? What if anything was wrong with his calculation? So, ang sagot lang dyan is that nagkamali na siya ng calculation in a way na hindi niya kinonsider na he's doing annual payments. Parang ginawa niya lang kasi is that minultiply niya yung percentage no sa kanyang original indebtedness, that's 7,000 times 0.07, and then that means na meron siyang binabayaran ng 490 times 4 for every year, di ba? So, and then dinivide niya sa 7,000, which is the original price. So, wala namang mali dun, pero we have to make sure na that is the only true. Kung halimbawa, wala talagang interest rate na nag-accumulate from the previous payments, diba? Pero diba, alam naman natin na for any annual annuity, we know naman na as we decrease yung ating bayad, technically the annual interest rate is being the computation for the next amount that you should have been paid is actually decreasing kasi nabayaran na natin yung other indebtedness from the previous payment. So basically, hindi talaga siya ganun kino-compute. Ang reference natin wouldn't be 7,000, and it's not really that i-multiply lang natin sa 4. The perfect way to compute for this is that we draw a cash flow diagram and we have to take that reference or all the annuities into a certain single reference point wherein that is our consideration. So usually we take that to the present and then we compare. But even though if you try to take that a certain amount in the future and then yung investment or indebtedness was taken from the present to the future, you should be able to obtain the same result as the effective annual interest rate being 6.7304%. So wala dong problema, it would just be the same thing. Okay, so pag binasa natin dito, the answer is ano ba sabi dito? Ayan. Albert's method would not reveal by how much. That is true. Kasi alam naman natin na, di ba, yung interest rate nung being charged by the bank will increase. So, totoo naman talaga yon. Then again, kung kukumpute natin siya based on Albert's idea, that's 28%. That's too much, di ba? Though, hindi naman talaga siya ganun. That's usually pag binayaran mo yung original amount, and then it usually compounded yan by a certain point. So, hindi talaga siya ganun. Hindi talaga yun yung ganun ang ating binabayaran. So, you should be able to understand that when you try to take some plans or whatever, and then the interest rate is actually a very concerning matter when it comes to business. Okay, and I think we can now proceed to number 4. Now, I think this is another parang computation ulit ng interest rate na nagkamali, parang ganun. The fly-by-night finance company advertises a bargain 6% plan. So, ito sabi ng company 6% yung aming interest rate for financing the purchase of automobiles. To the amount of the loan being financed, 6% is added for each year money is owed. The total is then divided by the number of months over which the payments are to be made, and the result is the amount of the monthly payments. Now, for example, a woman purchases a 10,000 automobile under his plan and makes an initial cash payment of 2,500. She wishes to pay the 7,500 balance in 24 monthly payments. So that is, you can see the table on how it was being broken down. So yung una would be the purchase price, that's 10,000, and then minus the initial payment, which is done at the moment probably the contract was signed, so that's 2,500. So less, we have 7,500 that is due, and then we have the 6% finance charge for 2 years. That's 0.06 times 2 years. That's to 7,500. So that becomes 900, and then the total payment that should be paid should be 8,400. So ang ginawa niya lang is dinivide niya yung 8,400 into monthly payments, so that's 350. So in short, he or she will be paying $350 per month at a total of 2 years, so that's 24 payments. So what effective annual rate of interest does she actually pay? So in short, the most important thing that we have to remember here is only the annual or the monthly payments or monthly payment, that is $350, and then the balance due, which is actually PO, that is equal to 7,500. So what is the effective rate of interest that she actually pays? So with this, we can just equate that 7,500 is equal to A, so that's 350, and then quantity 1 minus 1 plus I raised to negative, how many payments do we have? That's 24. Kasi monthly payment also, we divide this by I. Therefore, your I is equal to, so yung balance yung gagamitin natin, kasi baka isipin nyo yung 8,400. So kasi yung 8,400 na ano na yun parang that's another addition na ginagamit ng company to compute for your annual interest. But in this case, since yung due mo lang is 7,500, we stick with that value. So this gives you 9.2722 times 10 to the negative 3. So this is your interest period per month, diba? Now to solve for the effective annual rate of interest, we know naman na we have to find yung ating I sub E. And this is actually equal to equating this, diba, to your 1 plus IE. This should be equal to 1 plus I over M. So technically, since this is per month, alam naman natin na this is taken from compounded monthly, so we could raise this to 12, and this should give you your IE. So that is I sub is equal to 1 plus 9.2722 times 10 to the negative 3 divided by 12 raised to 12. So, di ba ganyan siya? Or raised to 12 na lang, sorry. Hindi na pala natin kailangang i-divide yan kasi that's already your I. So, yan. And then raised to 12 and then minus 1. So, your effective rate of interest should be equal to, that is 11.7120%. Okay? So, this is the annual effective rate of interest. So, hindi siya 75 but 7120%. So, medyo nagkaroon ng discrepancy siguro sa decimal. I think nagamit ko lang dyan is 9.27 lang siguro dyan. Hindi. So, yun nga talaga. 11.7120. Okay? So, that ends the solution for your number 4. Now, we can proceed to number 5. So, again, let's have a recap yung nangyari sa number 4 muna pala. So, yung ginamit natin is the balance yung 7,500 and then hinanap natin yung interest rate niya per month. And then we have to compare that to its effective annual rate of interest. So, basically, yung effective rate of interest per month, we need to raise that to 12 kasi the rate of interest per compounded monthly is yung 9.2722 to the negative 3, and then you raise that to 12, that is 1 year, then subtract 1 from that, and that gives you the effective annual rate of interest. Now, let's move forward sa number 5, okay? Now, the local and only banker makes this statement.
We can loan you $168,000 at a very favorable rate of 12% per year for 5-year loan. However, to secure this loan, you must agree to establish a checking account with no interest in which the minimum average balance is $32,000. In addition, your interest payments are due at the end of each year, and the principal will be repaid in a lump sum amount at the end of year 5.
What is the true effective annual interest rate being charged? Now, let us create a cash flow diagram kasi medyo a little complicated ang gantong case, no? Now, borrowing, initially we have, taasan natin para kita natin, no? So, technically, nag-borrow tayo ng 160,000 in this case, diba? 160,000. But then again, nag-deposit tayo ng 32,000 kasi nga, requirement ng bangko na magkaroon tayo ng checking account. So, technically, yung ating kailangan ng bayaran kasi, syempre, idededuct na yun ng company sa atin. So, that's 128,000. So, this is technically your initial starting amount na you will have to pay in after amortizing our annual payments. So, basically, meron tayong 5 payments, di ba? 1, 2, and then 3. Ito at the end of every year, 4, and then 5. Now, on top of the 5th payment, we know quite well na meron pa tayong isa dyang payment. Yung isang payment na yon is an addition to that payment na due natin. So, from this, knowing na meron tayong A dito for each of them, meron pa tayong isang additional, which is actually equal to the balance that you have. So, let's say this is your piece of O. So, meron pa ditong piece of O that is equal to 128,000. So, in short, para magbabayad ka ng annual payments mo, less the amount that is on the bank. So, this means that if you have your 128,000 loan that is less 160,000 less 32,000 na, so 128,000 na. And now from this, yung A natin, we can compute that by simply taking this sentence, 12% per year loan, that's 160,000. So in short, you can just take the 12% of 160,000 and that gives you your annuity. So for every year, you should be paying around 19,200. So that is your annual payment. So ganito yung mangyayari, no? Annual payments mo 19,200 each year for 5 years and then mag-add ka ngayon ulit ng 128,000, which is actually your due, taking into consideration yung binaborrow mong amount minus yung iyong charge dun sa bank. So parang ganun siya. Kasi technically, you can take that amount again after the 5-year loan. So parang ganun lang naman siya. Parang itong company nito, gusto niya patubuan yung 32,000 mo, kaya nandun siya sa checking account mo, pero ibabalik naman niya ulit sa inyo para magkaroon ka ng buong 160,000. So basically, that's the idea. So how do we solve for this, no? Ang gawin lang natin is, since established na yung cash flow, we just have to bring this all to the correct reference point. So I think the best reference point for us would be the future. So you can just bring this all to the future as well as this one. And ito, stay na lang siya dyan. Now from this, we could say na we can bring this 128,000 to the future. So that means 128,000. And di naman yan annuity. So we could use the compound amount factor. So that's 1 plus x raised to. Or we could just use I. So I na lang and then raised to 5. So therefore, hindi natin alam yung interest rate. Yun yung hinahanap natin eh, yung true annual interest rate. So that is 5, and then we could use this annuity, so that's 19,200, and using the future uniform series factor, so that's 1 plus I raised to 5 and then minus 1 all over I, and then we add this 128,000 kasi nasa future na naman siya eh. So from this, we could say that the value of I is actually equal to 0.15 or 15%. Okay? So, ganun lang kasimple yung pagko-compute. And then, bakit di ko na hinanap yung effective annual interest rate? That means na yung ating interest rate na na-obtain, annual interest rate, that is already the true effective annual rate of interest. Kasi, remember, when we have an interest rate that is represented per year, so we could say na that is always your annual interest rate, effective annual rate of interest. Basta ganun per year siya. Now, kung it is per month or let's say semi-annual, so yun yung kailangan natin siyang i-convert in terms of sa kanina natin solution yung may raised to 12 or raised to 2. So, ganun siya. Pero pagka per year na siya, so hindi na natin siya kailangan i-convert. And that means na ito yung kanya talaga binabayaran. So, ano ba yung trick dito? So, yung mga ganitong problem, it is especially tricky when it comes to finding the value of A. Kasi, imagine if you'll be thinking about the rate of 12%, you might be thinking na, oh well, since meron tayong 12% interest rate, I could just use yung ating unknown yung A, and then I'll try to compute for the value of A using 128,000 probably. So basically, that must be a pitfall trap. So whenever you encounter such kind of problem and then given sa inyo yung 12% or interest rate, yung inyong annuity would always be like obtained from that certain annual interest rate multiplied by the principal amount that you're trying to loan. So, laging ganun yung mangyayari dyan, no? Basta may certain case tayo na ganito, naglo-loan tayo ng and then may pinataw na interest rate. So, assume nyo na lagi na yung annuity would be coming from the interest rate times your principal amount. And then, yung i-amortize natin na balance would be less than the parang minimum maintaining balance nung usually ay parang ano ba yun? Account na, or checking account na kailangan mong i-pledge sa company, no? So, kaya ang nangyari dito is 160,000. So, naging 128,000 na lang kasi nag-pledge ka na ng 32,000 sa checking nila. But then again, hindi yun umi-increase ng value. It's just that nandun lang siya. Pero at the end of the 5-year period, para makukuha mo uli siya, pero together with the 128,000 na kailangan mo pang, in addition na kailangan mo pang bayaran, parang ganon. So, kung nalito pa rin kayo dito, imagine nyo, nagbayad na kayo ng 19,200 given na may 12% interest ka dun sa 5-year period na yun. And basically, kung i-consider nyo yung time frame ng 192,000 na 5 times, parang 5 payments mo siya na ginawa. So basically, meron kang 96,000 na nabayad na. So sure ball na yun, meron ka na doon 96,000. And then, yung plus 32,000 mo gives you 128,000. So technically, yun na yung parang kabuuan nung in-amortize natin into annual payments without considering yung ating formula for annuity. But then again, parang dinagdagan ka pa ng 128,000. So, technically, ang total ng binayaran mo, makes sense without any time value natin, is twice. 128,000 times 2 is actually 256,000. So, basically, yun yung parang pinaka-best idea na we can think about this. 256,000 binayad mo, lang natin, parang in-amortize natin into 5 payments wherein yung pinaka-mahirap is yung parang dulong payment natin, which is 128,000. Okay, so that's it for number 5, and I think we can now move forward na sa ating last of the MARR method, which is the external rate of return. And dun sa 6, ito yung para pinaka-complicated, pero not really that complicated naman na hindi nyo maintindihan. Okay, so let's have the discussion.